I built custom smokers for 15 years, raised 4 kids, and thought I had the perfect marriage. Then I took my wife to her company Christmas party and watched her disappear with a stranger. When she came home at dawn wearing his jacket, I knew our life was over. But what she found the next day, when her key wouldn't fit our door, was just the beginning. By the time I was done, she'd lost everything she thought she deserved, and discovered what happens when you betray a man who knows the value of loyalty. My name is Dalton Pruitt. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been building custom barbecue smokers and grills in my workshop behind our house in Tennessee. It's honest work, the kind that leave your hands dirty and your bank account comfortable enough to raise 4 kids and keep a wife happy. At least, I thought I was keeping her happy. The night everything went sideways started innocently enough. Claudia had been invited to her marketing firm's annual Christmas party, and for some reason, she actually wanted me to come along. Usually, she'd make excuses about how I wouldn't enjoy myself, how it was just work people talking shop. But this year she insisted. "You should meet my colleagues," Claudia had said, adjusting her emerald green dress in the mirror. "Especially the new account director. He's got some interesting ideas about expanding into outdoor lifestyle marketing." I should have paid more attention to the way her voice changed when she mentioned him. Should have noticed how she'd bought a new dress without mentioning it, how she'd spent an extra hour on her makeup. But I was thinking about the custom smoker order I'd just landed from a barbecue chain in Nashville, not about reading between the lines of my wife's sudden enthusiasm. The party was held at the Hermitage Hotel downtown, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I felt out of place in my best suit, watching Claudia glide through conversations like she was born to it. She introduced me to her boss, a few co-workers, but there was an energy about her that seemed different. Electric. Restless. That's when I saw him. Reed Hawthorne looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of confident smile that made you wonder what he was really thinking. When Claudia introduced us, he shook my hand with the grip of a man who'd never done a day of real work in his life. "So you're the famous barbecue king," Reed said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Claudia talks about your work all the time." She did. This was news to me. Claudia rarely showed interest in my business beyond asking when the next payment would come in. I watched them during the cocktail hour. Nothing obvious, nothing I could put my finger on. Just the way she laughed a little too hard at his jokes, how she leaned in when he spoke, the way her hand lingered on his arm when she made a point. Around 9 o'clock, I went to find her to suggest heading home. The twins had early soccer practice, and Caleb had been texting about help with his college application essays. But when I looked around the ballroom, Claudia was nowhere to be found. I checked the bathroom area, the bar, even stepped outside to see if she'd gone for air. Nothing. Then I saw Reed's empty chair at his table, his jacket draped over the back like he'd left in a hurry. My chest tightened. I made another sweep of the venue, more methodical this time. The coat check attendant said she hadn't seen my wife. The valet confirmed Reed Hawthorne had left 20 minutes ago. In his car, with a woman matching Claudia's description. I took my wife to a party, and she left with another man. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Every traffic light gave me time to think, to replay the evening, to piece together all the signs I'd been too blind or too trusting to see. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by half-finished smokers and the smell of cold metal, trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. Every rational part of my brain kept offering excuses. Maybe they'd gone to discuss business. Maybe she'd gotten sick and he'd offered to drive her home. Maybe I was being paranoid. But my gut knew better. Around 4 in the morning, I heard a car pull into our driveway. I watched from the workshop window as headlights swept across our front yard, then disappeared. A few minutes later, I heard our front door close softly. Claudia was trying to sneak in like a teenager breaking curfew. I gave her an hour to get settled, then walked into the house. She was in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. Still wearing that green dress, but something was different. Her hair was messed up, her makeup smudged, and she was wearing a men's jacket I'd never seen before. "Where did you go?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Claudia didn't even look up from the coffee maker. Reed offered to show me some portfolio examples from his previous campaigns. She said, her tone casual as Sunday morning. We went to his office to look at some materials. Until 4 in the morning. Now she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not shame, calculation. We lost track of time, Claudia said. You know how it is when you're passionate about a project. We were discussing potential opportunities for your business. Actually, Reed thinks there's real potential in the outdoor cooking market. That jacket hanging loose on her shoulders told a different story. So it did the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes when she said his name. Whose jacket is that? I asked. She glanced down like she'd forgotten she was wearing it. Oh, this. Reed's. It got chilly at his office, and he lent it to me. And you forgot to give it back. Claudia shrugged, finally turning to face me full on. That's when I saw it. A small mark on her neck, just below her collar. Not quite hidden by her hair. I'll return it next week, she said. Preston, you're acting strange. Nothing happened except a business discussion that ran late. She was lying. We both knew it. But watching her stand there, bold as brass, wearing another man's jacket and expecting me to swallow her story whole, I realized something had shifted between us. Maybe it had been shifting for months, and I'd been too busy building smokers to notice. I'm going to shower, Claudia announced, brushing past me toward the stairs. The twins will be up soon for soccer practice. She was right about that. In 2 hours, Owen and Nash would come thundering downstairs, expecting breakfast and clean uniforms. Ivy would need a ride to her weekend job at the bookstore. Caleb would want help with his college essays. Life would go on like nothing had changed. But everything had. By Sunday afternoon, I made my decision. While Claudia was at her yoga class and the kids were scattered to their various activities, I drove to the hardware store and bought new deadbolts for every door in the house. Heavy-duty Schlage locks that couldn't be bumped or picked easily. I spent 2 hours installing them, working with the methodical precision I brought to my metalwork. Each turn of the screwdriver felt like taking control back. Each new key represented a choice I was making about who belonged in my life. Caleb came home first, around 5 o'clock. My 17-year-old had always been sharp, and he noticed the new locks immediately. Dad, did you change the locks? Caleb asked, examining the fresh brass hardware on the front door. Security upgrade, I said simply. He gave me a look that said he knew there was more to the story, but didn't push. Caleb had inherited my tendency to think before speaking, to watch and listen before jumping to conclusions. The twins arrived home 20 minutes later, chattering about their soccer scrimmage. They barely noticed the locks, too busy arguing about who'd scored the better goal. Ivy rolled in just before 6, tired from her shift at the bookstore and more interested in getting to her homework than examining door hardware. Claudia returned at 6:30, her yoga mat slung over her shoulder and that post-workout glow that used to make my heart skip. Now it just reminded me of how she'd looked coming home at dawn, flushed and disheveled from someone else's bed. I was sitting on the front porch when she pulled into the driveway, cleaning one of my welding tools and waiting. She walked up the path like any other evening, keys already in her hand, chatting about her class and something funny the instructor had said. Then she tried to unlock the door. The key didn't fit. She tried again, jiggling it, thinking maybe she'd grabbed the wrong key from her ring. When that didn't work, she examined the lock more closely, finally noticing it was different. Preston, Claudia called through the door. Why won't my key work? I set down my welding tool and walked to the door, opening it slowly. She stood there on her doorstep, key still in her hand, wearing that same confused expression she'd probably practiced in the mirror. I changed the locks, I said calmly. Why would you change the locks without telling me? Same reason you went to Reed's office without telling me. Her face went through several expressions in quick succession. Confusion, indignation, then something that looked almost like respect. Like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Preston, we need to talk about this like adults. We do. But first, you need to decide where you want to have that conversation. Because right now, you don't live here anymore. The next day, she found out her key no longer fit the door she'd walked through for 16 years. Claudia stood on our porch for a full minute, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Behind her, I could see Mrs. Thompson from next door pretending to water her plants while obviously listening to every word. You can't be serious, Claudia said finally. This is my house too. Our children live here. The children who you abandoned last night to go play house with your new boyfriend? I stepped aside, but not enough to let her pass. They're inside doing homework and wondering why Mom's been acting so strange lately. I told you it was business. Business that required you to wear his jacket home? Business that left marks on your neck? I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Claudia, I may work with my hands, but I'm not stupid. That hit her. I saw her jaw tighten, saw the mask slip for just a second. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper so the neighbors couldn't hear. You want the truth? Yes. I spend the night with Reed. Yes, we're involved. But this marriage has been dead for years, Preston. We've been roommates, not husband and wife. There it was. No more pretending, no more elaborate lies. Just cold, brutal honesty delivered like she was discussing the weather. So you decided to fix that by having an affair instead of talking to me about it. Claudia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Talk to you? When? Between your work and the kids and your weekend projects. When exactly was I supposed to schedule a conversation about how lonely I've been? You could have started any time in the last 16 years. I tried. You just never listened. That stung because part of it was probably true. I've been focused on building the business, providing for the family, making sure we had security and a future. Maybe I'd missed some signals along the way, but that didn't justify what she'd done. So what now? I asked. Now you let me in so we can figure this out like reasonable people. The kids don't need to see their parents acting like children. I shook my head. The kids are going to see their father standing up for himself for once. They're going to learn that actions have consequences, and that lies don't get rewarded with second chances. Through the window, I could see Caleb in the living room, pretending to read, but obviously listening. He caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. My son understood what was happening, and he approved. I'll get a lawyer, Claudia threatened. Good. So will I. I started to close the door, then stopped. Oh, and Claudia, Reed's jacket is hanging in the coat closet. You can pick it up when you come for your things. I closed the door and turned the new deadbolt. Outside, I could hear her breathing heavily, probably trying to decide whether to make a scene or retreat with whatever dignity she had left. She chose retreat. For now. The hardest part about standing your ground isn't the initial confrontation. It's dealing with the aftermath when the people you love start taking sides. Tuesday morning brought that reality crashing down on me like a dropped anvil. I was in the workshop, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of cutting steel for a custom smoker, when Caleb appeared in the doorway. My 17-year-old had his mother's eyes, but my stubborn jawline, and right now, both were working against me. Dad, we need to talk, Caleb said, closing the workshop door behind him. I set down my cutting torch and pulled off my safety mask. What's on your mind, son? Mom called me last night. She's staying at Aunt Sarah's, and she's pretty upset. Caleb leaned against my workbench, his arms crossed in a gesture that reminded me painfully of myself. She says you locked her out of her own house over a misunderstanding. Is that what she called it? A misunderstanding. She said you jumped to conclusions about her working relationship with some guy from her marketing firm. Caleb's voice was careful, measured. Dad, I know you and Mom have been having problems lately. Ivy and I aren't blind, but kicking her out seems pretty extreme. I studied my son's face, seeing Claudia's influence in his words, but also recognizing the genuine concern there. Caleb had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts before they escalated. Son, what would you do if you took your girlfriend to a party, and she left with another man, then came home wearing his jacket? Caleb's expression shifted. Is that what happened? That's exactly what happened. And when I confronted her mother about it, she admitted she's been having an affair with Reed Hawthorne. The color drained from Caleb's face. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the same methodical approach he used for his calculus homework. She actually admitted it, he asked finally. She did. Said our marriage has been dead for years, and she was lonely. I picked up a piece of scrap metal, turning it over in my hands. Maybe she was right about some of that. Maybe I did get too focused on work and miss some warning signs. But that doesn't excuse what she did. Caleb nodded slowly. What about Ivy and the twins? They don't know yet, do they? Your sister thinks I'm being unreasonable. She's been texting me all morning, demanding I apologize to her mother. I met Caleb's eyes. The twins don't understand why Mom isn't here, and I'm not sure how to explain it to 12-year-olds. Dad, there's something else you should know. Caleb hesitated, then pushed forward. I saw Mom with that guy about 2 weeks ago. At the coffee shop downtown. They were sitting really close, holding hand across the table. I thought about telling you, but I figured maybe they were just friends or business partners or something. That hit me harder than I expected. My son had been carrying this burden for weeks, trying to protect me from a truth I needed to hear. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, Caleb continued. I keep thinking maybe if I'd spoken up, you could have confronted Mom before it got this far. This isn't your fault, son. Not even close. I put my hand on his shoulder. You were trying to protect your family. That's what good men do. 3 days after Claudia moved out, a courier delivered an envelope that made my blood run cold. Inside was a letter from Patterson, Williams and Associates, demanding immediate mediation regarding marital property division and interim spousal support pending formal divorce proceedings. Claudia wasn't wasting time. She wanted half of everything I'd built, including the workshop and the custom smoker business that had taken me 15 years to establish. But what really stuck in my craw was the claim that she deserved ongoing financial support because she'd sacrificed her career advancement to support her husband's entrepreneurial endeavors. That was rich. Claudia had worked part-time at the marketing firm for exactly 18 months total over the past 6 years, spending more time planning girls' trips than developing campaigns. Meanwhile, I've been working 60-hour weeks to keep our family afloat. I called my lawyer, Jim Ellis, a straight-talking former Marine who'd handled the legal work when I incorporated my business. Jim listened to the whole story without interrupting, then gave me the kind of frank assessment I needed to hear. Preston, adultery doesn't carry the weight it used in Tennessee divorce law, but it's not irrelevant either, Jim said over the phone. The fact that she admitted the affair works in our favor. The bigger issue is going to be the business valuation and the house. She didn't contribute a dime to the down payment on that house, and she's never been involved in the business operations. Doesn't matter. 24 years of marriage creates certain presumptions about marital property. But we can fight this, especially if we can demonstrate that she's been planning this divorce while hiding assets or income. That got my attention. What do you mean, hiding assets? I'm going to recommend we hire a forensic accountant to look at your family finances for the past 2 years. If Claudia's been moving money around or making large unexplained purchases, we need to know about it. The forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chun, found exactly what Jim suspected she'd find. Over the past 8 months, Claudia had been transferring small amounts from our joint savings account into a personal account I didn't know existed. Nothing huge, but it added up to nearly $12,000. More damaging was the credit card activity. Designer clothes, expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, even a weekend trip to Asheville that she'd claimed was a company retreat. The receipts told a different story. Romantic dinners for two, couple spa treatments, a boutique hotel known for its intimate atmosphere. She's been financing her affair with marital assets, Rebecca explained during our meeting. These expenditures show a clear pattern of deception and financial misconduct. But the real bombshell came from Caleb. My son had been doing some investigating of his own, using his computer skills to dig into social media accounts and public records. Dad, you need to see this, Caleb said, showing me his laptop screen. Reed Hawthorne isn't just some random marketing executive. He's been married twice before. Both marriages ended in divorce, and both ex-wives accused him of adultery in their court filings. The pattern was becoming clear. Reed wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who targeted married women, probably getting some sick thrill out of breaking up families. And Claudia had walked right into his trap, bringing our 24-year marriage down with her. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late January. I'd been dreading it for weeks, knowing Claudia's lawyer would try to paint me as an unstable, controlling husband who'd locked his wife out of her own home. What I hadn't expected was the nuclear option she'd decided to deploy. Mr. Pruitt, Judge Harrison began, shuffling through the papers on his desk. I'm looking at some serious allegations here. Your wife's attorney claims you've exhibited threatening behavior and that she fears for her safety and the safety of her children. My lawyer, Jim Ellis, shot me a warning look before standing. Your Honor, these allegations are completely fabricated. My client has no history of violence or threatening behavior. In fact, we have evidence that Mrs. Pruitt has been systematically deceiving her husband and misappropriating marital funds to finance an extramarital affair. Claudia's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Victoria Walsh, rose immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Pruitt's alleged evidence is irrelevant to the safety concerns at hand. My client has documented instances of her husband's increasingly erratic and controlling behavior, including changing the locks on their family home without notice and refusing her access to her personal belongings. I watched Claudia sitting at the opposing table, dressed in a conservative gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. She perfected the look of a frightened, vulnerable wife, complete with tissues at the ready and downcast eyes that occasionally darted toward the judge for maximum effect. Mr. Ellis, Judge Harrison continued, what evidence do you have regarding these alleged financial improprieties? Jim stood and handed a thick folder to the court clerk. Your Honor, our forensic accountant has documented a pattern of deceptive financial behavior spanning 8 months. Mrs. Pruitt secretly transferred over $12,000 from joint marital accounts into a personal account, then used those funds along with marital credit cards to finance romantic getaways and expensive gifts for a paramour, Reed Hawthorne. Objection, Your Honor, Walsh interrupted. Mr. Pruitt's characterization of legitimate business expenses. Legitimate business expenses. Jim's voice carried the incredulous tone of a man who'd seen too many lying spouses in his 20-year career. Your Honor, these expenses include couples spa treatments, romantic dinners at establishments known for their intimate atmosphere, and a weekend getaway to a boutique hotel specializing in romantic retreats. Unless Mrs. Pruitt's marketing firm has adopted some very unconventional client entertainment strategies, these are clearly personal expenditures related to her affair. Judge Harrison examined the documents for several minutes while the courtroom remained silent. Finally, he looked up at Claudia directly. Mrs. Pruitt, did you engage in an extramarital relationship with Mr. Reed Hawthorne? Claudia's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw her glance at her lawyer, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Your Honor, my relationship with Mr. Hawthorne developed after my marriage had already broken down due to my husband's emotional neglect and controlling behavior, Claudia said, her voice steady but lacking conviction. Preston created an environment where I felt isolated and unappreciated. Reed offered me the emotional support and understanding that had been missing from my marriage for years. That doesn't answer my question, Mrs. Pruitt. Did you or did you not engage in an extramarital relationship while still married to your husband? A long pause. Then, barely audible, yes, Your Honor. The judge made some notes, then looked at both legal teams. I'm going to order supervised visitation for both parents pending a full custody evaluation. Mr. Pruitt, you will have the children Sunday through Tuesday. Mrs. Pruitt, Wednesday through Friday. Weekends will alternate. Neither parent is to speak negatively about the other in front of the children. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for, but it wasn't the disaster Claudia had been planning either. The custody arrangement lasted exactly 3 weeks before it fell apart. Not because of anything I did, but because my children started making their own choices about where they wanted to be. It started with Ivy. My 16-year-old daughter had been resistant to the entire situation, convinced I was being unreasonable and that her parents should just work things out like adults. But something changed during her second week at Claudia's temporary apartment. Dad, can I come home early? Ivy called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight with frustration. Mom's having Reed over for dinner, and it's really awkward. They keep acting like they're this perfect couple, and she wants me to be happy for her. What do you want to do, sweetheart? I want to come home. I want to sleep in my own room and not have to pretend that what Mom did is okay. Ivy's voice broke slightly. Dad, I'm sorry I gave you such a hard time about the locks. Caleb told me what really happened, and I understand why you did it. An hour later, Ivy was back in our house, helping the twins with their homework while I finished up some paperwork for a commercial smoker order. Having her home felt like a piece of my world clicking back into place. The twins were next. Owen and Nash had been confused by the whole situation, struggling to understand why they had to live in 2 different places and why their parents couldn't just fix whatever was wrong. But 12-year-olds aren't stupid, and they'd started picking up on things. Dad, why does Mom's new boyfriend keep trying to act like our stepdad? Nash asked during our Wednesday evening together. He keeps asking us about school and sports like he cares, but then he and Mom go in her room and close the door. And he bought us these expensive video games, Owen added. But when we told him we already had them, he got all weird and said we should be more grateful. Reed Hawthorne was trying to buy my son's affection, probably at Claudia's suggestion. It was a classic move from the Homewrecker playbook, But it was backfiring because my boys weren't impressed by a flashy gift from a man who was sleeping with their mother. "Boys, you don't have to pretend to like him," I said carefully, mindful of the judge's order about not speaking negatively about their mother. "And you don't owe anyone gratitude for gifts you didn't want or need." By Friday, both twins had asked to come home early too. They missed their own beds, their video game setup, and the comfortable routine we'd established. More importantly, they were uncomfortable being around Reed, who kept trying too hard to win them over while obviously resenting the time he had to spend being fake nice to someone else's kids. Only Caleb stuck to the custody schedule, but that was because he was using his time at Claudia's apartment strategically. My 17-year-old had become our family's intelligence gatherer, documenting Reed's behavior and Claudia's increasingly erratic mood swings. "Dad, they're fighting a lot," Caleb reported during one of our evening workshop sessions. "Reed keeps talking about his future plans, but none of them include staying in Tennessee. And Mom's starting to realize he's not as serious about their relationship as she thought he was." "What kind of fights?" "She wants him to meet her parents, but he keeps making excuses. She talks about them moving in together, and he changes the subject. And yesterday, she caught him texting another woman." Caleb paused, organizing his thoughts. "I think she's starting to realize she threw away her marriage for a guy who's not worth it." The custody arrangement was supposed to provide stability for my children. Instead, it was showing them exactly who their mother had become and what she valued most. And it wasn't them. Reed Hawthorne's exit from Claudia's life was as calculated and cowardly as everything else about him. It started with missed dinner dates and unreturned phone calls, then escalated to a text message breakup that would have embarrassed a teenager. Caleb showed me the message he'd seen on Claudia's phone. "This situation has become too complicated for me to handle right now. I need to focus on my career and can't deal with the drama surrounding your divorce. Take care." 24 hours. That's how long it took Reed to go from promising Claudia a future together to treating her like a liability he needed to shed. My wife had thrown away 24 years of marriage for a man who couldn't even be bothered to break up with her face-to-face. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Claudia's temporary apartment became a fortress of tissues and empty wine bottles. According to Ivy, who'd reluctantly agreed to spend one evening checking on her mother, Claudia was barely functional. "Dad, she looks terrible," Ivy reported. "She keeps saying she made the biggest mistake of her life, that she doesn't understand how everything went so wrong so fast." But I was done being Claudia's safety net. When she called me crying, begging for another chance, I listened politely and then gave her the same answer I'd been giving for weeks. "Claudia, you made your choice. You chose Reed over our marriage, over our family, over the life we built together. The fact that he turned out to be exactly what I thought he was doesn't erase what you did. But Preston, if you knew what kind of man he was, why didn't you warn me?" The audacity of that question took my breath away. Would you have listened? You were so convinced that I was the problem in your life that you ignored every red flag, every warning sign, every piece of evidence that Reed was using you. The legal proceedings moved forward with mechanical efficiency. Jim Ellis had assembled an airtight case documenting Claudia's affair, her financial deception, and her false accusations. The custody evaluation strongly favored me, noting that all 4 children had expressed a clear preference for living with their father full-time. The final divorce hearing was almost anticlimactic. Claudia sat at the defendant's table looking like a ghost of her former self, while her lawyer went through the motions of representing a client who'd lost before the proceedings even began. "Mrs. Pruitt," Judge Harrison asked during the final testimony, "do you have anything you'd like to say before I render my decision?" Claudia stood slowly, her hands shaking slightly. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, might show some genuine remorse for the destruction she'd caused. Instead, she said, "Your Honor, I just want what's fair. I made some mistakes, but I was married to Preston for 24 years. That should count for something." Even now, even after everything, she couldn't take full responsibility for her actions. She was still the victim in her own mind, still deserving of consideration and compensation for her suffering. Judge Harrison awarded me full custody of all 4 children, the house, and the business. Claudia received a modest cash settlement and limited supervised visitation rights. No alimony, no claim to the workshop or equipment, no ongoing financial support. Justice served cold, exactly the way I preferred it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, life had settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly normal. The kids were thriving, my business was growing, and the house felt like home again instead of a battlefield. Caleb had been accepted to Tennessee Tech with a full scholarship for mechanical engineering. Ivy was excelling in her junior year and had started helping me with the business side of the smoker company. The twins had joined the middle school wrestling team and were channeling their energy into something productive. Most importantly, my children had learned lessons about integrity, consequences, and standing up for what's right. They'd seen their father refuse to be disrespected, and their mother face the results of her choices. Claudia had moved to Nashville, where she'd found work with a smaller marketing firm at a fraction of her previous salary. She sent the occasional text about missing the children, but made little effort to maintain a consistent relationship with them. The supervised visitations had dwindled to monthly phone calls that grew shorter each time. Reed Hawthorne had disappeared completely, reportedly taking a job in Atlanta and leaving no forwarding information. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd already started his pattern again with a new target, some divorced executive who thought she'd found her soulmate. My business had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined possible. The publicity from the divorce, ironically, had brought attention to my custom smokers. Several restaurants and barbecue chains had placed large orders, and I'd hired 2 part-time employees to help with production. "Dad, you seem different," Ivy observed one evening while we worked on invoicing the workshop. "Happier, maybe? More relaxed." She was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life instead of managing someone else's emotional chaos. I woke up each morning knowing I could trust the people in my house, knowing my priorities were aligned with my actions. Sometimes losing the wrong person puts everything else into perspective, I told her. The house renovation was nearly complete. I'd remodeled the master bedroom, updated the kitchen, and added a screen porch where the kids and I spent evenings talking about their days. Every change erased another trace of the woman who tried to tear our family apart. Dr. Vera Blackwood, who turned out to be a real friend rather than just Claudia's enabler, had helped me understand the psychology behind what had happened. Claudia hadn't just cheated. She'd systematically rewritten our marriage history to justify her actions. Some people can't accept responsibility for their choices, Dr. Blackwood had explained. They need to believe they're the victim, even when they're clearly the aggressor. It's easier than facing the truth about themselves. Looking back, I could see the signs I'd missed, the slow erosion of respect and communication that had made Claudia vulnerable to Reed's manipulation. But I'd also learned that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and you can't love someone enough to make up for their lack of integrity. My children had their mother's contact information. If they wanted a relationship with Claudia, that was their choice to make as adults. But they'd also learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who show up, keep their promises, and put the family's needs above their own desires. As I locked up the workshop that evening and walked toward our house, I could hear laughter spilling out through the windows. My children were home, safe and secure in the knowledge that their father would always fight for them. It wasn't the life I'd planned 25 years ago, but it was better than the lie I'd been living. And that was enough.